There are 4,218 PS2 games, and I've got to beat every one of them. I've got to own the game because I'm playing on the original hardware, but I've beefed it up using a RetroTink 5X, some component cables, and more to come soon. Can I do this before I die of old age? I hope so. Half-Life was originally released in 1998 and ported to the PS2 in 2001 by Gearbox Software with assistance from Sierra Entertainment and Valve Software. Gearbox was able to add in higher-res models of characters, guns, and environmental objects, as well as an exclusive co-op mode called Half-Life Decay. With all the upgrades and bug fixes, is this really the definitive version of the original game? I wasn't aware of a PlayStation 2 port for the game Half-Life, and now there was a lot of other people who stopped into the stream to see the game for themselves. So thank you to Rocket for donating and suggesting I play this game because it was absolutely a blast. I originally played this game on the PC many years ago, so I didn't know what had changed between the original version and the PlayStation 2 port. Well, we get to see things like higher resolution character models with more details like eyes that track things and facial expressions. There were also some levels that were updated, a lot of bugs were ironed out. It just seems to be the definitive edition of the original game. Not only this though, there is a special 2-player mode called Half-Life Decay that is exclusive to this game. You play as 2 female scientists in the lab and you go through Black Mesa with you and another person, couch co-op. I will eventually play through this, so watch out for that video soon. There's also a special mode once you beat the game, you can unlock it with maybe a password or something like that, where you play the entire game as a Vortigaunt, one of the guys who shoots lightning and teleports around the area. This version also has mouse and keyboard support, and that's exactly what I use the entire game, mouse and keyboard. I use a K120 Logitech keyboard and an M100 Logitech mouse. These are like the most basic version of mouse and keyboard you can possibly get that plug in through the USB slots on the front of the PS2 and work just fine. However, there's this caveat for the PlayStation 2, and I'm not sure if it's due to the mouse, the hardware, the software, or what it is. But when you have a mouse plugged in, the lower the sensitivity of the mouse, the less it tracks the mouse itself. For some reason, the only way for it to recognize the mouse is moving is to have a high sensitivity. I understand that it makes some sense, but I'm confused as to why they can't make it so that you can have a lower sensitivity. If it's just my mouse, then forget this, it's not important. But if it isn't, if it's the software or the game or whatever, then yeah, it's a problem because I don't usually use high sensitivity. I'm a low sense FPS player, so it's really weird when I only use my wrist when I'm used to using my whole entire arm to aim. Regardless of this though, I'm still able to aim much better than I am with a controller. I'm just a mouse player, so it's really nice to be able to do this. But let's go ahead and start the journey through the game and see if you agree with me that this is the definitive version of the original game. The game begins introducing me to my character, Gordon Freeman, age 27, and he works in this highly classified laboratory, seemingly underground. And I ride this tram for quite some time while the game just tells me a bunch of shit, and we hear this woman over an intercom. Oh look, it's a fellow employee in a nice suit. He looks a little sickly. Hopefully he doesn't come back later in the game. After I exit the tram, I walk through several hallways and rooms, seeing scientists all with the same voice and very similar looking security guards all named Barney. Eventually, they give me my HEV suit, which is supposed to protect me from environmental hazards, but I really just use it for the free morphine.
Morphine administered.
Like most other people in the world, I wander around until someone finally tells me to do something. These 2 scientists ask for my help, and I go inside of this room where they're trying to run an experiment, and they want me to drop a payload off into this weird-looking, electrified / portally-looking thing. So that's what I do. Part of the way through the experiment, a catastrophic failure happens, and the whole lab starts to explode, and people are dying outside. Somehow we're fine. This suit is impenetrable. But we get teleported to these random areas with monsters? Oh my god. Eventually we end up back in the lab where we have to escape, and sadly as we escape, we see the horrors of the monsters we saw ourselves in the portal-y thing. They've come to our world and they're eating people and killing people. At this point, the only thing we find to defend ourselves is the crowbar. It's everyone's favorite weapon, and I'm convinced that this game is actually only just walking around with the crowbar hitting things, and everything else is just a lie. Eventually I find myself a pistol with which I used to ice those stupid aliens. I continue to travel around all the different labs through these maze-like hallways in a way that doesn't really make sense in reality. I eventually get to a part where there's lots of turrets that will activate when you walk through these red lines, as well as mines that have blue lines. They both activate if you walk through them, and if you activate them, you're probably going to die unless you have a really good way to get away from them. Okay, so these 2 dopey scientists need to move out of the way so I can continue. Anyway, what the fuck? Who put all this shit in the hallway? This whole time I've been trying to escape the labs where all this death death is happening. And I do make it to the surface, but the second I do, the government shows up and is like, hey, we're not here to help you. We're here to kill everyone and everything because we're gonna cover it up. So I plunge back into the darkness of the underground. As I travel through this little underground section, I come to a hole in the ground where there's a monster sticking its big tentacle things through it and trying to stab me as I go through the area. So you've got to use grenades to distract it. And while you do, you go to 2 separate parts to turn on things for a rocket that is sitting right above it. If you can turn those things on and come back to the control room, you can turn it on and nuke that thing. And this is what's left. Sorry, buddy. It doesn't seem like escape is going to be possible, not with the government coming after us. I mean, they want to cover this whole thing up. But we do learn that there might be a chance to close the portals, letting the aliens in if we send this satellite up into space. Maybe the scientists can use it to close the portal. To get there, we have to go through a series of underground tunnels, all under Black Mesa, filled with tons of monsters and electrified rails and a little cart that you're supposed to drive. However, I don't drive that shit. Fuck that. It's easier to run. You can run and choose where you want to go, and this place is already enormous. So there's no reason to take the slow cart as opposed to my very fast running and jumping. During my time down here, I meet a very, very big, strong alien I've nicknamed Binky the Brute. He is unkillable as of now because we don't have the weaponry to support killing him. That's okay, it's alright, I got this, because there's an elaborate setup of switches and electrified water you can lead him into that will just make him explode, so that works. Also, while I'm down here, I find that if you talk to the security guards, they will follow you and they'll try and help you. Although they are also kind of invincible, especially when the enemies are on a mounted turret. If you place Barney in between you and a mounted turret, the mounted turret will just stop firing, but they'll also hit them if they do fire, and it will just, nothing will happen. So you just push him forward and get close to the mounted turret until you can kill the dude on the mounted turret without getting hurt. That's pretty cool. After almost an hour of traversing this little section, I finally make it to the silo where you can activate the satellite that will go into space. And we do. I activate the satellite, it shoots up into space, and we just kind of have to keep moving on from this point. We're stuck in this area, so we've got to go back underground for a third time. I finally get the sniper type weapon, which is just a crossbow that can also be fired underwater, and the very, very few sections you have to fire underwater at these large mutated fish alien things. And I do kill one of them, but I never do it again. I mean, there's really not a point. They're really tough, and I just don't have to sit in the water very long, so I just say fuck it. Along the way, we learn that the satellite is not going to work. There is really no way it was going to do anything to the portal. So the scientist is like, hey, your suit is full of a bunch of sensors and trackers. You're going to get caught by the government unless you go this direction into the deserty area where there are a bunch of holes that you can sneak past, which in reality is just you sneaking through different like cliff faces and stuff. It's not, you're not sneaking past cameras, but it doesn't matter. You sneak past stuff going through the desert so you can reach the Lambda complex because there's got to be another way to deal with the portal. This next section of gameplay is a bunch of various areas inside and a bit outside. We haven't quite reached the desert yet, but that's because we need to go through a bunch of sewer type areas. There's conveyor belts with these big vats at the end of them that you have to jump off before you fall into the vat. Each of these areas is more nonsensical than the last, and I believe that it is on purpose. Obviously, they're making areas for you to explore, and this big facility underground has a lot to it, but you'll never know exactly what it's doing or why something is there, because it really isn't there for a real reason. This game does a really good job of making me feel this cosmic horror vibe. Obviously, there's aliens and there's a portal, and we don't really know very much. While this game does have some story to it, and it was one of the very first FPSs to have this kind of story attached to it, and the player goes through it and learns a little bit, you still don't learn enough. So cosmic horror fits because everything is nonsensical, it's mysterious, you don't get enough information to understand everything. The most you understand is that you want to live and you want the Earth to also live. So you do your best with what you're given, and everything else is just a mystery. And it's going to stay a mystery. In fact, there's even a character in here who shows up in the other Half-Life games who's a fucking mystery. That dude in the suit at the beginning, G-Man. Fuck that dude. The next several hours of gameplay all consist of getting to the surface in the desert. And on the way there, we go through some labs that connect to the desert. And we get to see some aliens that we haven't met yet in tubes. These big, huge tubes, clearly showing that before this event, they already had aliens that they had found somehow, that have come through, that they've been experimenting on, I assume. And, well, that doesn't look good because they're probably coming through to kill us for things like that. But it also raises the question, like, how long have we been doing this? And did we know about this before? Why wouldn't Gordon have known about this? Why have we not been shown this? I mean, that makes sense. It's all a mystery. Maybe Gordon didn't know. He's just a theoretical physicist after all. I make my way through the desert, fighting enemies inside the sand, fighting the government who keeps trying to do airstrikes and have a helicopter follow me around, We get another one of those big monsters that are underground that have these pincers and tails come up and hit you. You just have to distract them with grenades run past. You fight some new aliens, bigger ones that have large guns that fire these like B-type enemies that will hunt you down and hurt you, even around corners, which kind of sucks. You do eventually get the gun yourself, and the ammo regenerates, so it's got 8 ammo and you can just fire that thing all over. It's pretty helpful for smaller enemies where you don't want to waste the ammo of, say, your rifle or your shotgun, and then the big enemies can all be taken out with things like the rocket launcher and the laser rifle and this big blue charge cannon that we get. So we go through the desert for quite some time, fighting tons of enemies, tanks, vehicles, just everything, until we do reach a part where we get to call in the airstrikes that they've been calling in. We kill the dude up here, and you can use these little controls to move the airstrike, and we've got to break these walls and this door down so that we get into the Lambda complex. We get out of the desert and we go to the lowest section of the facility, where we have to climb up by turning on coolant systems and having scientists help us get to the lab itself. During this time, we find an area full of portals and these like rotating platforms, which again, how the fuck would you use this in your day-to-day job? Like, let's just jump from one to the other and into these portals. And the funny thing is that these portals don't always lead where you want them to. There are different directions that you can approach the portals from. You must jump into them from the correct direction so that you go up and up and up until eventually you get to where you want to go. I die quite a few times on this section because when you jump into a portal, if you don't time it right, the platforms underneath that are moving will just be out of the way and you'll just fall straight down into like death. So you really have to be careful. You have to watch for a pattern. We finally make it to the very end of the Lambda complex, where we talk to some scientists and even Barney, and they say, hey, the only way we can think of to close this portal is to go inside of it and stop whatever's on the other side from opening this portal up into our realm. Apparently there's something holding it open. That's all they can tell me. So they have to boot up the system to open up a portal for me. I must protect the scientist, and once I go into the portal, I arrive in Zen, the alien world. I'm not really sure if it's a planet, if it's a world, if it's a dimension, or what, but it's weird. This whole place is built and looks crazy and has all of the aliens we've been fighting, including a few more. This section is about an hour to an hour and a half long. It's not very long. Most of this is some platforming at the beginning, some platforming in the middle, and you have to fight quite a few big aliens. Like, there's a lot of them. One of the big guys you have to fight, I do have enough weaponry to kill him. I also have to fight this other boss that's kind of weird. I'm not really sure what it is, but it leads me to a couple different areas as I deal damage to it. And you just have to spend time being careful and using the super double boost jump. When you jump, you can press space again, or, you know, the jump button again, and you'll do this forward momentum jump. And it's pretty helpful against this boss because he charges you. So you can like fire at him, wait until he gets close, and then jump past him. Before the final boss, we ascend these weird looking areas still, with lots of ranged aliens popping in and out of the area, trying our best to just blast them from far away. It's getting difficult when they group up in like 4 or 5, and you've got to track them through the air. And honestly, their colors are very similar to some of the environmental stuff, and it's hard to see them. The only good thing about this is that the PS2 version has this lock-on system for the controller, this diamond in the middle of the screen. It will lock on to enemies. Now, that will only help if you're using a controller. It will auto-aim at them and you can fire. With the mouse and keyboard, it helps enough to locate the enemy. Then you still have to aim at it and fire. So I guess it's helpful. It is now last boss time. This guy is a little difficult. There's some crystals on the walls that you must shoot first. First and foremost, you've got to destroy the crystals. Once you do that, you then must deal damage to him. After you deal enough damage, the top of his head will open up where you can fire into it with a strong weapon, say the rocket launcher with the guided laser, and after several hits to the little thing on his head, it will die. But it's not that easy. First, you destroy the crystals, which isn't too bad. Next, you must deal enough damage to him to have him open the top of his head. You don't know how much damage it's gonna be. You just kind of have to deal some and then jump using one of the little bouncer things on the ground up, and if his head opens all the way up and reveals itself to you, that's enough. If his head opens up and then closes again, it's because you haven't dealt enough damage. As far as I know though, I'm not really sure. There wasn't a lot of feedback from hitting him, so I shot him some more. Eventually, I was able to jump high enough and see his head open. While you're doing this though, he has quite a few homing attacks. One of them is the worst, and it's not even damage. He sends a portal to you that sends you to a different place in the level without him, so you can't fight him anymore. You have to then get out of there. The problem is that the areas he sends you to need you to jump off of the bouncers on the ground up to a portal on the ceiling, which first of all looks a little janky. And second, this area does have some like moon type gravity where you're much lighter and can float as you jump. So using these things jumps you and bounces all the way up to the ceiling and then you come all the way down. Now, if you come all the way down and land on the ground, you're dead. You have to land in water. It still kills you if you plummet to the ground. There's still fall damage. If you can manage to make it out of that area, which there's lots of aliens there, you can just skip them and I just take Bouncer up to the portal. As long as you can aim well enough, you can get there quickly. Once you come back, he will still be shooting portals at you. There really isn't a good way to dodge them. Even getting behind something, sometimes that portal just comes right the fuck through and gets you. I didn't even really die by him damaging me that much. Honestly, the deaths were from me falling and getting killed by the aliens in the other areas as I'm trying to get to the portal back to the boss arena. So this takes me about an hour of trial and error and figuring it out and finally getting him, which is fine. I think the last boss should be difficult and it was a decent portion of a fight. I also didn't know what I was doing. You gotta kind of try things and I mean, that's just how it goes. And once you beat him, you have stopped the being who is opening the portal to Earth. However, you never return to figure out what happens. At the end of the game, that dude in the blue suit you see several times throughout the game, G-Man, is like, you did a great job. We want to hire you. My bosses want to hire you. And you're like, who the fuck are you? And who the fuck are your bosses? And why are we on a train in the middle of nowhere and the darkness and the void? He says you can either join us or not. If you join him, he just says, good choice, and the game is over. That's it. He will call you again when he needs you for a job. If you don't, he will just send you to a place with aliens and they will kill you. Now, I didn't do that myself, but I remember that. I remember saying no and like they just destroy your ass. So you don't want to say no. I mean, I guess you can if you want. After this, the game is over and we get credits. Game 62 is complete. Half-Life was a fantastic game, even on the PS2. And in fact, this is, in my opinion, the definitive edition because you've got the updated models, you've got the bug fixes, you've got a couple extra little areas, I guess. I'm not really sure what that's about. I can't remember all the areas from before. So I assume that there's a few things I got to see that wasn't in the original game. Eventually, we will play the co-op game play mode Decay, and we'll get to see a little bit of that. That'll be a bonus video. It'll be a bonus 62 and a half video, you know, like game 62 and a half. And you'll see that soon, and my wife and I will play together, I think. But I absolutely recommend this game if you have a PS2. And if you have a mouse and keyboard, please. These things are $10 at like Target or Walmart or Meijer. You can get them for very cheap. You can probably get them online in a bundle for $10 even. I don't know though if the mouse is worth it since I was having problems with it and I've had problems with it before. So it's very possible maybe you want to try and look for a mouse that is exactly what you need for the PS2 and it works better or something. I don't know. I would really like it to work better. I'm not sure if it does, but this was a fun experience and I recommend it. Such a good game. So much fun. Great FPS. One of the best on the system, honestly. And I have never even heard that it had a port on the PS2. So surprise, surprise. Anyway, I want to thank everyone in the video who has stayed this long, who has watched the video. I want to thank everyone in the stream who was there to help me because that last boss was hard and then make fun of me as I die over and over and over again, which is great. It was a good time. Thank you to all the YouTube and Patreon memberships. You guys really made this possible. In fact, Rocket was the one who donated and said, I want you to play Half-Life. So I played Half-Life and it was awesome. We're doing game giveaways on the stream. I'm going to try and give away games. I've actually tried to give away games 3 times and every time I do, the person's like, no, give it away to someone else. I'm like, okay, all right. So come into the stream if you would like and I'll give away some games. If you want a game, I'm just giving them away. I don't want these games. They're too much. There's just too, I don't have space for them and I have to play 4,000 games, man. Just come take the games from me. I don't want them. Anyway, we have a few videos coming out soon. Final Fantasy X, Guitar Hero Rock the 80s, Celebrity Deathmatch, and I'm currently working on Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, and you'll see that soon, although it's a long game. Thank you everyone once again. I'll see you for another video soon. Later.